streams louder.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Please help us grow by giving us a like and subscribe to our channel. Enjoy the show. Today's episode is with Maz Miller. So Maz is a sports psychologist, which is awesome because that's exactly what we talk about, right? But it's not often you come across a sports psychologist. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, Maz?
Sure. What do you want to know? We could do a
Well,
whole
I want to
podcast
talk
with
about
me.
I want to talk about like how you came up,
Yeah.
and what kind of got you leading towards sports psychology. What kind of got
Yeah.
you there, and then what was that process like?
Yeah, sure. So my background is actually general psychology, so more the clinical side of things.
Yep.
And I think it was sort of a mixture of everything. I enjoy exercise, fitness, that kind of stuff, and sports. And then my husband started getting into triathlon. And in particular, when he started coaching, that's when we were having a lot of conversations that just kept leading into psychology. So somewhere along the way, I kind of decided that I'll just study it, and I realized how much more I could learn about it all. And then there's a whole, I don't know if Nathan's told you the story about how he got into, how I convinced him of doing sports psychology with me.
Well, yeah, and if you've tuned into a few episodes ago, Nathan is a triathlete, and he's a professional triathlete, and he got into a bicycle accident where he was going down a hill, and he doesn't quite know what happened either, but he kind of lost control and hit a tree, and then a farmer nearby found him and called you up, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can imagine the traumatic kind of because Nathan's coach had gone through something similar where he ended up being paralyzed from an accident, and then a neck accident, and then Nathan's got several vertebrae that's been fractured or broken, and then I could just only imagine that kind of headspace that would put you in.
Yeah, and he had a sort of a mild brain injury as well that I picked up on pretty early, but everyone kept telling me I was just a psychologist. So yeah, I was overthinking it and doing all that stuff. And it wasn't until I sort of chatted to neighbors, and they were like, "Nathan's told me the same story 3 times now." So he's got that. I mean, he's doing really well. But he's got that as well. But even before his injury, there was a time where we went to one of his triathlons in Geelong. Did he tell you about this? And
go on. I'll let you.
Yeah, we were driving home, and until this point, I kept trying to tell him about all this sports psychology stuff, and he'll tell you. Pretty much said, I'm not listening to you. What do you know about triathlon? You do psychology. And we were driving home, and I started asking him some questions, and he didn't know at the time, but I recorded him talking to me. And a week or so later, I said to him, "Hey, do you want to listen to this case study? I'm just learning a little bit about psychology, blah, blah, blah." And I played it to him, and he didn't even realize it was him. And I said, "What do you think about that guy? Like, if you were competing against him?" And he said, "Oh, I'd smash him. Like, look how negative he is," and blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Well, that's you, mate." And that's when he was like, "Oh, what?" And he just didn't realize that that's how he was sort of talking to himself, and how he was evaluating things and the insights. And after that, he was sort of converted. So now
that is such a good point. that self-talk. Admittedly, I actually didn't even ask you about self-talk. I've got a list of questions I'm going to ask you. That wasn't even one of them I put down. But that's one of the most obvious and most important ones.
Yeah, and just linked to so many things, performance itself. Like, we know that negative talk, when you stress and your muscles tense up, that's going to have an immediate effect on what you're doing, no matter what the sport. But just in general, it just ties into everything from confidence to motivation to focus, all of the sports psychology areas. Yeah.
What are some of the we've got athletes that will be listening to this, and coaches, and they're not a lot of them aren't going to be that familiar with sports psychology,
Mm.
although they
Yeah.
should be, because I
Yeah.
think you have this um, there's this connotation that kind of comes along with the fact that you're going to see a psychologist, that you might have something
Mm-hmm.
wrong, but that's not
Wrong.
necessarily true either. That
That's right.
that's not true at all. But what might be some of the reasons why someone might come to see a sports psychologist, and then what are some of the improvements that you would actually hope to see, as an
Mm.
athlete from like a therapy
From that.
sessions?
Yeah, I guess it's so true, because everybody thinks that psychologists are there when there's a problem, um, and maybe in a clinical sense, and not even necessarily always there. But definitely in sports psychology, that's not the case. So my research did a lot of research on mental toughness in particular, because I just kind of wanted to know what it is and what it takes. And the key areas that I was able to identify were focus was a big aspect, motivation, and knowing how to sort of ride through those slumps and how to stay motivated. Confidence was a big one. Emotional IQ, which is where self-talk falls into, and how you deal with things when they go wrong. Emotional regulation, pre-competition, during training, etc. And the last bit was just life in general. And I guess this is why I like that I've got both the disciplines, the general psychology and the sports, because a lot of sports psychologists just focus on you as an athlete, and it just becomes so sports focused. And, you said one of the reasons they come to see me, and the biggest reason is that they know they can do something, but they can't put it together on the day when they need to. And it's not always just, I guess, these areas of sports psychology that are the issue. Sometimes there is other things going on, whether it is at home, in relationships, or just more clinical, I guess, for themselves. And that's when sports psychology doesn't work. So if there's other things going on and they're not being addressed, and all we're doing is band-aiding and doing quick focusing and mindfulness stuff, that doesn't work. So
Yeah, you're right. That could very well
mm,
be just the case, isn't it? Because it was like, okay, so you show up for training and you're feeling bad or whatever, then you sort of, like you said, go through some mindfulness training where you might start to
mhm,
focus on your breathing or something like that, and that might work momentarily, but it's something that will come back again and again and again,
mhm,
because you haven't resolved the underlying issue,
that's
which
right.
could be happening at home, or something might have happened in your childhood that's still just coming back to
Mhm.
you. And as a sports psychologist, you mightn't focus on any of
You
that.
can't see that, yeah. And I've even heard, sports psychologists say that I work with them as an athlete. So when that happens, they might need to seek help elsewhere, which, yeah, I don't know. We've got a saying, whatever you resist persists. So that's why I guess I'm calling mindfulness and things like that a band-aid, because there is a part of your brain, we're designed to solve problems. We're designed to focus on what needs to be fixed. So breathing is great, but it's kind of like, I think of it as handing somebody a glass of water while they're in a burning house. It's just not
Yeah,
going to do the job.
yeah.
So, yeah, if anything, with athletes like anyone else, I think it's just so important to be aware of themselves as a person as well as an athlete.
Oh, so true. That's
Mm.
and like one of the biggest issues I think I come across, and that's just me, and I'm just like the Joe
Yeah.
Blow, strength and conditioning guy, and you get this, and I think innately as humans we kind of see when someone's going through some sort of
Mm.
mental thing, and
Yeah.
and it's evident in your speciality. Like for me, when I see that someone's quite capable of doing something, but then they just they can't bring
Can't put it
themselves to do
together.
it or
Mm.
whatever. Like confidence can be a big issue. How do we
Yeah.
start to build confidence?
Oh, so much about confidence, but I
Sorry about
guess,
that. 'Cause-
I'm like, where do I start? Do you know what? Confidence is actually simple. It's really simple, but that doesn't
Mm,
mean it's easy. That's the problem. So there's in simplicity, the way to get confident is doing hard things and then feeling confident about knowing how to do hard things. And I think that sometimes people will use, whether it is positive affirmations or all of these things, to pump themselves up. And that's not really what confidence is. It's a sort of a mixture between, being in your ability, like knowing that you can do something, and then yourself as a person. And when you mix those two together, I think that's what makes a confident person. So it's kind of this balance between knowing that even though you haven't done something before, you haven't pushed yourself that far before, that you can, because you have in some similar situation before, but
Yeah.
also not having that fear of failure, that if you have a go and then that doesn't work, then everything's going to fall apart. So it is this mixture between being a confident person and having the skill set. And in its purest simplicity, it's doing the hard stuff.
Yes.
It's challenging yourself and over, really.
Yeah. And just like you said, those positive affirmations, like, you know, maybe listening to some psych up music, or like
Mm-hmm.
reading some inspirational quote for that day.
It's good.
It's good, but that's not confidence. They'll give
No.
you a bit of a spark for about, you know,
Yeah,
not for very long, and then you'll crash again. But
exactly.
so perhaps the way to go about this might be to, you know, yeah, is knowing that you've done the hard work
Mm-hmm.
up to this point, and then
Yeah.
everything is, you've got other indicators indicating the fact that you should be able to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's
Absolutely.
those,
Yeah.
those are,
And one way to do that, sorry, I keep cutting you off, I'm just excited. One way to do that is even just keeping your sort of a training journal. And I don't mean dear diary, I mean just a log of what you're doing. And you might just sort of go rate it out of 10 of how hard it was and how you felt, and just write a few things down. Because then when it comes to a hard one, you literally have evidence there of all the hard things that you've done. Because I think sometimes, especially people that are high achievers, they've kind of dismiss what they've accomplished. It doesn't often get celebrated enough and noted enough, so it doesn't really register.
mm,
So sometimes even having something like that, I often say to people on the day of competition, you've literally, if you're asking yourself, have you done enough, there is evidence that you've done everything, and you can kind of reflect on some of those hard sessions and know that you were able to do them.
yeah, exactly. The people who don't ask that question of themselves are often, you know, the people maybe haven't done enough,
Yeah.
arguably speaking.
Oh, those are the perfectionists, right? The
Right.
self-doubters, because there's always more that you could do. And to them, I guess nothing is ever enough. So it's good to have something there.
Yeah, 100%. Leading up, um, leading up to a big game, or just any game, because I know a lot of kids that have, and a lot of athletes that have this issue of um scaring themselves or putting themselves into a mindset of kind of negativity, of being like, oh man, this is going to be tough, this team looks good, that person
Mm,
looks better than me, and
mm,
then when they get on the court or on the field, they really screw themselves up. And
mm,
then there's also this thing of being overwhelmed, which is
mm,
something that I often had an issue with, but then I found ways to kind of bring myself down, and then
yep,
being underwhelmed,
yep,
and having that kind of not having the want to actually go compete that day. How do we
mm,
find out what
yeah.
what would you do? Like what kind of strategies can we do to kind of get ourselves into a better mindset
Is that right?
for competing?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the first thing about feeling that fear or that anxiety, that should always be there first of all, because if you didn't care about what you're about to do, that's the only time you would feel zero anxiety. So no matter how much of a professional you are or how good you are at what you do, there should be some kind of anxiety there. And I guess the way
Yes.
that it's labeled is the difference. To me, the mechanism behind anxiety and excitement is completely the same. It's just how you choose to, I guess, perceive that situation. So that would be my first thing, that, you know, sort of that self-talk of when you do feel a bit sick. A lot of athletes will talk about not feeling like eating and that kind of stuff. On the day, it's reevaluating and sort of saying to yourself, oh cool, like my body's letting me know that I care about this and I really want to go well. I feel that way when I go on a holiday, so why you know, because I'm excited, but I don't sort of think, oh my god, I'm so anxious about holidays. I think I'm just excited. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is about what you were talking about, is that peak performance zone. And every athlete differs in this. So if you think of, let's say you've got to you can go from 0 to 100. 0 means you're doing nothing. 70 to 80 means you're in your peak performance zone. And anything over 80 means you're just too overwhelmed and you can't you can't do well. So I guess the idea behind that is that there is positive stress, which is the stress that's going to get you into that 70 to 80 peak performance zone. The way that each one of us starts off the day, though, that's where we're all different. So some people might wake up and go from 0 to 10. Some people might wake up at 20 because they had a fight with somebody the night before. There may have been other stresses that have built up. So for them, they don't need a lot of excitement to get to 70. They need to chill out, like you were saying. And then for others, they need to amp themselves up. The key, again, is just knowing which way you go. And the best way to know that is, I think one way to know is to think back to a performance where you did really well and have a think about what the process was behind that. So just because everybody else is mingling before a game doesn't mean you should. Because if you're somebody that gets stimulated really easily, you should probably have your headphones on and doing a meditation on the side somewhere. And I think it's just always knowing and not expecting it to be the same every single time as well, although mostly it is. It's just knowing where you sit and being comfortable enough to do what you need to do. So I've got athletes, for example, I'm just thinking about a triathlete in particular, that when they travel for a competition, they won't even stay close to where all the other athletes are staying. If you've ever been to a triathlon, the day before, there's always, gear you can buy and everybody's there. And it's just like, it's like an anxiety pit because all I can hear is people say, should have bought those shoes? Should I have done that? What did you do? Did you have an injury? It's just this whole
and then you start to get into that too. Then you start to buy into that. You might start to buy into the things they're saying. Of like, maybe I should have bought this, or I should have bought gels, man. That hill I've heard is really, really hard. Or you might even just buy into the excitement of it all, and it really hypes you up too much.
Yes. And it's also, there is strategic athletes out there that know to do that to you if you're their competitor. I've heard of this as well. And there's a lot of, what did you do? I did this. Oh, did you do this? And they start to last minute question their training and preparation and the lead up. So if you're somebody that gets excited by that, by all means, you're the person that should be there. But if you're somebody that gets overwhelmed, then no.
There's a lot to be said about leading up to the day, like on the day, if you've got a routine that you follow, to follow that routine as usual. If you always get up and then you always have this kind of breakfast, and then you might have a coffee, and then you go and then you warm up and then you go to play, or whatever the routine may be, that you followed that religiously, unless it's showing some adverse effects, like maybe the coffee is making you feel a bit acidic during the game or whatever, then maybe you should cut that out. But maybe to try to stay away from any fad things that people are popped up. Like the worst thing you could probably do is take some sort of extreme sort of like pre-workout thing that you've never had before, and then taking that just because it's a big game or something like this.
Absolutely. And I think it's Liverpool, the soccer club over there, that they're so anal about this, that the hotels that they stay in, the rooms always look the same. Their sheets are changed every day and they're the same colored sheets. The temperature they're so routine about everything, because when you're in a high pressure situation, anything that's going to take energy away from you is no good. So the less your brain has to figure out, and that's why they make the layout looks the same, because it's familiar. So they have nothing to worry about or work out.
Exactly. Imagine showing up to the hotel and then the temperature being a little bit too hot than what you used to. Then you're trying to tossing and turning all night, and then you don't get a good night's sleep.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that you were talking about, the pre-workout and that kind of stuff that hasn't been tested. This is where I think the confidence stuff comes in and self-sabotage comes in.
Yes.
Because that doubt that creeps in is coming from a low level of confidence, and the self-sabotage is actually a really handy mechanism, because if you take a pre-workout gear, you buy a new pair of shoes, and that's what you choose to go on the court on to play your game or whatever you're doing, whatever the sport is, and then it doesn't go well, you now have an excuse. It wasn't me, it was the shoes. It wasn't me, it was the breakfast I had. Often the footy players will have a meat pie before the game that they've never exactly never had. And then it becomes, oh, I felt a bit sick because of that, or it's because I didn't sleep the night before.
Yeah, yeah.
So that kind of self-sabotage is actually really handy, because our confidence is so fragile. And it's a sort of a protection to say, it's not me, it's all of those things. Where truly, if you're an athlete of an elite athlete, that's where you put it on the line, and there's none of those excuses, and
Yes.
you actually figure out if it is you, if your training is actually working, if things are working, and being willing to sort of look at yourself and go, did I give it my everything, rather than having something to blame it on.
That is such a good point. And, I think that's when, I really do think that's when you start to turn into a better athlete, when you start to take personal responsibility of what happened, even if, even to some degree when it wasn't your fault, to see what you could have done to even made that
Yeah,
a better situation, as
absolutely.
opposed to trying to blame everything on everyone else. Because as soon as you've done that, you've given up your power to that person. You're like, okay, I couldn't go to training that day because mum couldn't drop me off to football training. And then whereas you could have been like, okay, I couldn't go to football training that day, but I did a run instead, then you're
Yeah.
taking that personal responsibility upon yourself. Or I rode my bike to training, or something like that. But as soon as you put the power into someone else's hands, you've just made yourself a victim, and then you just can't there's no coming back from that now.
No,
You're just a
there's
victim.
no growth. No
There's no
growth.
growth.
No growth, which is exactly what sports are about, right? Like, no matter what level you're at, if you really, really dig down to why people are there, it's growth. But this whole
Yes, you're
protection
totally
of,
right. You're totally right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this whole, that, I guess that is the opposite of that, because if you're there truly to be a student and to continue learning, then you put yourself out there and you're willing to fail and do crap so you can do better.
Yeah.
Um,
And if
and
that's
often
one
in
of the
the,
things that sport can teach you, that's an extremely valuable lesson.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think in the media, just to go back a little bit, I guess that's what we always see, right? The coach is getting fired because the team didn't do well. And I always think, oh, come on, like, is it really the coach? Like, all of a sudden the coach's got to go because they're not, delivering.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I just, that sometimes, and I guess every situation is a little bit different, but you got this feeling it's something like the coach got fired because there's some sort of voodoo in the club, like things aren't quite clicking
Yeah.
and kind of working as well as they'd like it to work, and they just don't think that coach is bringing the right sort of attitude to the club, and then therefore they're just like, oh, I don't really know what it is, let's just get rid of him, get a new guy in,
We've done
and then
something.
let's see what changes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always funny when that happens. And even like not on a professional level, that's when people sort of go, it must be the coach, or it must be, the program or whatever. And you're like, well, is it? Because it's working for so many people. So is it,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Have you got any activities for athletes to help improve their sporting skill, perhaps when they're not even, at the game, or they're not, and they're just sort of relaxing at home or whatever, and
Yep.
and they and maybe they just couldn't get the training, but there is ways to kind of improve yourself as an athlete without having to be there,
Yep.
just sort of being thoughtful. And one of the instances that sort of springs to mind is, and there's probably a few others, just sort of I don't actually know what it's called, but where you start to sort of imagine what it is that
Yeah.
you do in your sport.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go into that a little bit?
Visualization or
Visualization.
imagery. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the strongest one. There was even a study done where they got people to go to the gym, and they got people to visualize lifting weights, and the people visualizing lifting weights still built muscle. So not to
Oh,
the same extent, obviously, as physically doing it. Doing the job is always better. But certainly it still happened. And I know when I've worked with athletes with injuries, we've done this, where I've said, still go to training, still visualize yourself out there, do it as if you're doing it. And they'd always lose a lot less muscle mass than what they would have if they completely stopped. So
wow.
visualization is so, so powerful. I know we're talking about swimming. I learned to swim when I was 28 because I wasn't born here, so I didn't really swim. And the first thing I did was visualization before I even went to the classes. And it has different ways that you can do it. So if you're not somebody so for me, I hadn't been swimming, so I couldn't close my eyes and visualize myself swimming. So I didn't even know what that looks like. But what I did was I literally went on YouTube and just Googled freestyle and just watched the technique over and over and over, because what that does is create a blueprint in your mind so that when you show up on the day, your muscles already are familiar with it and you can pick it up quicker. So visualization, I probably would say, is the most powerful. And like I said, it can be just you watching a technique or somebody doing what you're trying to learn, or it can be yourself visualizing a race or whatever you're trying to do. Always from a bird's eye view. That's probably important to note, because people often
Right. So it has to be in a bird's eye view. Like
yeah,
that
because that's how you'd be, right? That's how you would be out there doing it. So if you're visualizing yourself running down a court, you're not going to sort of look at yourself from an audience, because that's not, your mind's not going to recognize that as well. But I guess it's more than just seeing, it's how it feels, what you can hear. So it's getting all of those senses involved as good as you can and going through it. I don't know if Nathan mentioned it, but we did it for when he was doing his worlds. But we're doing lots of visualization to a point where we used to get him to do things and his heart rate would go up as high as it would have if he was physically doing it, and things like that. So I think visualization is probably the most powerful one.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting about that Worlds is that he actually won that.
Yeah, he did. And he said, and I've had people say this so many times, it was like I'd done it before. That's usually, and I'm like, well, you kind of did in your mind. We went through it so many times.
Which is so helpful, because you sort of do get rid of that excess stimulation that you don't really need, I guess, from doing this visualization, because it feels so familiar. And then maybe that's just one of the big differences too, you know.
Definitely.
It's quite interesting how you kind of get that neural stimulation. Like when I say neural, I mean like you're kind of picking up these movement patterns and these skills without actually having ever done it before. And then I find that fascinating. You know what's an interesting one? Now this one's probably getting a little out there. I'm not sure you know really anything about it. I know I don't, but I just heard of it. But lucid dreaming. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah, and lucid dreaming is, correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I don't really know much about it, but you are just a little bit more present in your dreaming, and you are able to control what sort of goes on in this dream. And in which case you can, some athletes have been known to do this and then practice their sport in their dreams.
I'm laughing because I have dreams where I know I'm dreaming, and I'll say to myself, oh, we're dreaming, what do you want to do? And then I kind of can do what I want to do there. But yeah, definitely. That is one of them. It's probably a little bit, if you haven't done any visualization or anything like that, it might be a little bit too advanced.
Yeah, of course. I know this was going to like appeal to the 0.1% of the population who can actually do this thing. But it's interesting to know that this exists, and then athletes are taking advantage of this kind of thing, because
I was
especially if you're in a sport that's highly technical too, because if you're in a highly technical sport where it matters more about technique, you know, the physical aspects are important too, but it's like how you do something, and then if you're just practicing that in your mind over and over again when you're sleeping, it doesn't take any fatigue away. Like it doesn't fatigue your body, and you know, you're doing it in a state of recovery, and it's just that's got to be like a big advantage.
Absolutely. And gymnasts in particular, I was just thinking, they always when they're learning a new routine, they will visualize it before attempting it. So the sequences, and I guess because there's so much to memorize to do as well, they'll always do the visualization first. But the reason why I was sort of half smirking is, if you've ever had a dream where you had a fight with your partner, or you dreamt that they cheated on you, and you wake up the next day, it feels so real. Like you are like that, just, and I'm pissed off. I wake up, I'm like, you arsehole. Right?
You wake up, you smack Nathan in the chest.
Right. Right? It just shows you how powerful it is, and how real it feels. And another example of something similar, if you're driving and you just had a fight with someone, and you replay that while you're driving, you still get pissed off, you still get hot. So all of those things are still happening.
You know, so that's actually, and that kind of goes into that sort of like we were talking about a little bit earlier about that self-talk thing, because if we've got and we don't realize, the thing is, I think a lot of people don't realize they've got a negative or positive self-talk going on, or any talk going on. They just think it's just chatter. But that negative or
Mm,
positive chatter that's
yeah.
going on in the background all the time, that's that becomes subliminal messaging, right?
100%. You've got 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. It's a lot of thoughts. We
Yeah.
do know that on average, you're having a good day, say on holidays, sitting at the beach, at least 70% will still be negative. So we are actually, from an evolutionary point, designed to be negative. When you cross the road, you're so negative, you think you're going to die. That's why you're looking left or right.
Yes.
So we've kind of survived that way, to look out for danger. If you think about a group of positive cavemen and a negative ones, and the positive ones, when there's a rattle in the bushes, are saying, it's all good, it's just the wind. And they were right 99% of the time. But that one time they weren't ready because the negative guys were freaking out every single time. So we've actually survived being negative. The thing is that there's, I guess this is what we get into, that there's two kinds of brain. If you think of it, there's a thinking brain and there's an observing brain. So your thinking brain's job is to keep you safe. I almost picture like a kid constantly going, oh, what about this and this could happen, this could happen. And then your observing brain is the one that goes, chill out, it's all right. It's the one where you go, why did I do that? Or what am I
Yes.
doing?
Yes.
And that's the kind of one that you want to tap into. And I think, like you said, most people don't even realize there's something going on between their ears, and that having that awareness, how can I say, you don't have to be aware of everything. You can just start with one part of yourself. You might go, what do I do when people criticize me, for example? How do I react? So as you go to work, as you go to school, as you're at home and people say negative things to you, you just notice what you do in that situation. And then you might be happy with it, you might not be, and that's how you work on it. And then that leads to something else. This whole psychology stuff never ends. Even as a psychologist, I've been doing this in some way, shape or form for 18 years now, and I'm still finding things to work on myself. So when people sort of go, oh yeah, like, I think they think if you feel good that you don't need it, maybe, like, oh, I'm generally happy and I feel good, so that's me done. But that's so not what this is.
No, exactly. And I'm a big component of self-improvement.
Mm,
I'm always reading books on self-improvement.
yes.
And the reason why this is so important, and psychology is a form of self-improvement, reading is a
Absolutely.
form of self-improvement, is because if you ever want to achieve anything in life, it
Mm-hmm.
comes, you aren't born with the capabilities of becoming a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
You're not born with basically anything to do anything. You have to develop these things in form of self-improvement of some sort, and
Absolutely.
so I think people would be amazed what they could achieve if they did go through the route of
Mm-hmm.
self-improvement.
And we know 55% of your personality is built in, so to say, is genetic, and then the other 45 is what you make of it. And to me, that's a massive component. And
Yes.
you just mentioned about, if you wanted to learn about being a millionaire, unless you were born into that mindset, which most of us are not, you've got a lot of work to do, to sort of get to that place.
Yes.
And it's that way with anything. If you're trying to be a professional athlete, but nobody around you has done that, we've got a lot more work to do, because you weren't
100%.
probably talked in that way, I guess, because it wasn't there for your parents or your siblings or whatever.
I would even go as far as to, I know this is getting a little out there, but I just want to make sure everyone
Mm.
sort of understands the depths that this goes to. Like, if you even, if you're not a very nice person, the chance, or you've got some character like flaws that you're maybe not that aware of, or you are, but you don't think it's a big deal. This matters to the point of the kind of partner you get in the future,
Mhm.
the kind of employment you might get in the future.
Mhm.
Like it, because you end up with people who want to be, you end up with people like you, basically, like
Absolutely.
if you're a real jerk, you're going to end up with people who are probably jerks, or just are okay with people being jerks to them. So they're pretty weak-willed kind
Mhm.
of people. And then you're kind of building this up around you, and it's just not that healthy. But if you
Mm.
found out that you got a few character flaws, and then you worked on them, and then you'd end up with
Mhm.
better and better people around you, and then that just, your quality of life in that way even just improves.
Mm. There's a study done, and they call it misery. loves miserable company, where they, don't quote me exactly on the numbers on this, but essentially said there was 90 students that they had, and 30 of them were told they're about to go do a really hard exam and they kind of stressed them out. There was another 30 where they said it's going to be so easy, you're going to smash it, you don't need to be prepared. And then the 30 were neutral. When they put the 90 students in the waiting room, they actually started forming groups based on what they were told. So the
Oh,
conclusion of the study was that misery loves miserable company, because you sort of start to look for people that are feeling the same way as you. So all the people that were stressed out were hanging out together, and the people that were feeling confident were hanging out together. So if you're not aware of which camp you're on, it's pretty automatic that you just do that.
yeah.
And you're talking about who you marry. There's a theory that we marry the person that's like the parent whose relationship we want to improve on. So whether mum or dad you didn't get along with great, it's like your marriage becomes a do-over. I don't know, that freaks people out a little bit. They start to go, oh God, I married my
But I
mum.
don't think that's that doesn't freak me out at all. I think we all innately do that. I think, you know,
Yeah.
in one way or shape or another. Like if
Yep.
we saw someone, like we're learning a new sport, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, we saw someone, they went up first and they did the activity terribly, and then the next person goes up and does it a little bit better. You're like, oh, yeah, okay. And then you go up and you're like, okay, that's what he did well, I'm going to try that, but I'm going to try this as well. And then,
Mm.
you know, that kind of, it's very much just
Mm.
human nature, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
we always seek
And
to improve.
yeah, and that I guess that conformity, what we see being done is what, it's a big thing. I remember reading a study as well where they were getting people to guess. They were in like a dark room, getting them to guess how far away a light is from them.
Oh,
So even if people guess it pretty much right the first time, once they were in a group with other people who purposefully were saying it as like ridiculously wrong, by day 3 they were saying what everybody else was saying.
oh.
So that conformity as well. I don't know. I think in sport, when you see somebody else can do it, you kind of go, "Oh yeah, they did it. I can do it." Um,
Exactly. And you know, there's probably
yeah.
something in the idea of, you know, as an athlete, actually going out and finding the best person on your team and trying to spend more time with that
Hmm.
person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What was that
100%.
saying? You become the 5
Oh,
people you hang around most?
sorry. I'll be right back. I lost my headphone. I've just lost my headphone. Sorry about that.
No, you're right.
Yep.
I was just saying that, what's that saying? The you know, you become the 5 people you hang around
Yeah.
most.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And there's a lot
And
to that, right?
yeah, 100%. Well, even just the things that we just talked about around, the studies where they have found that people sort of stick to each other. And it depends what, and I think, depends, I guess, where you're at in your process, whether you're ready for that challenge or whether you're a bit of a time where you just need to stay where you are and concrete it a bit more. I think it's important to strategically know as well. So if you're somebody that's intrinsically motivated, internally motivated, I think definitely it can help to have that person as well, but it's balancing the two, I guess, and using it in that way. If you're somebody that's always motivated by other people being around you and people like that pushing you, then it'll be super helpful, right? But if
Mm,
you're somebody that can do that for themselves, then it's going to, I guess, tire you out if that's all you do.
I see what you're saying, because you're
Yeah.
sort of you know, I always there's a guy on the internet that a lot of us already know, Gary V.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know if you're familiar with that guy. That guy, I like his
Yep.
motivation and I like his message usually. It's just he stresses me out.
Yes, I was
He-
going to say his message is one of burnout as far as I'm concerned.
right?
Like,
And I don't know who he's talking to, because I think
hustle,
that guy
hustle,
is actually
hustle.
talking to the average person who just isn't that motivated and is feeling, you know,
Mhm.
just lazy, and they might need that talking to like that.
Mhm.
But for the person, like I'm guessing like you and me, you just don't
Mhm.
need that extra like push
I
of
was like,
like
shut
like
up.
we got stuff
Yep.
to do, you know. You know, he's just like, you're not doing enough, even though you're working, you know, this amount of hours and blah blah
Yeah.
blah, or you know. And
Yeah.
then, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily true of you can change slowly, but I feel like I you know, some people need a little bit more rest than others too,
Mm.
like, because I don't know, some
Yeah.
people just, I don't know if they just are the kind of people who only need 5 hours sleep, or you know, need five
Yep.
hours sleep, whatever that means. And
Yep.
then, you know, and then they can just work, relentlessly, and then
Yeah.
others
And
just don't have that in them. I don't know.
and it's just not healthy, is it? There's a reason you have rest days in your programs. Like, it is not healthy in any area of your life to just keep going and going and going. I actually have a real issue with the culture of hustle and productivity and just keep going and work hard and blah blah blah. I just think it's a load of shit, to be honest,
Yeah.
because it's just the perfect recipe for burnout
Yes.
and depression and everything else, because we're not designed that way. I mean, even the seasons, you look around, there's a reason there's winter and things slow down. We're not designed to just keep going and going and going and going. And sure, there's some people, like you mentioned, that are, but they're the minority, they're not the majority.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he doesn't need to talk to those guys. And if those
No.
guys listen to him, it would destroy them, because
Yeah.
they're so highly motivated anyways, and then this guy's telling them that they're not enough still.
Yeah.
Um
It's
and
too alarming.
they're not doing enough and they could be doing more. That would just absolutely destroy someone like that.
Yeah.
And someone, yeah, I don't know. I think he's really talking to a crowd of people who are just the bottom sort of like the guys who
Get
just,
going.
yeah, I think he's also talking to the guys that do like that, like we were talking about before, that kind of inspirational thing, that kind of like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, let's do it.
Mm.
But that
Yeah, yeah.
that little bit of motivation only lasts that instant, and
Mm-hmm.
it might last you a week, but that's all. It's not a real
Yeah.
thing, I suppose.
And because
Maybe the
you're borrowing it, you're borrowing someone else's motivation. That doesn't work.
You're so right. That is exactly what it is, right?
Mm.
So I suppose maybe, what would you say would be a good way to get a motivation?
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is going to be somewhat personal for everyone, but you could
Mm.
give us one instance on like a
Uh,
way to kind of develop a motivation.
to do it, yeah. I think the number one thing, and a lot of people talk about it, is true, is knowing your why, not your parents' why, not why they want you to
Mm.
do well, and knowing how far you want to go as well. Like, I've met a lot of athletes where their coach is ready for them to go to the Olympics and they're like, I hate what I'm doing. And if they had stopped at some point along the way, they probably could have gone into a different sport and done amazing, because it would have been theirs. So number one thing, I think, is just listening to yourself and your own, why do I love this? Why do I want to do this? And why is it important to me? And then the other thing is to not listen to Gary Vee and understand that you're not supposed to be motivated 24/7. This is the thing, nobody's motivated 24/7. I think the pros, or the people that do this really well, know how to deal with the slumps that come along. They understand that they're going to come. They understand and listen to their bodies for when they need to have that rest and what they need to do. And they also know how to get going again. And the easiest way to get going again is when you're so clear on why you're doing what you're doing and why it's important to you, because again, that's yours. It's not a video that you're watching, it's not a cool car that you're going to get out of it, or that external stuff, all of those accolades, and that doesn't matter. I think the people that enjoy the process of, or the purity of the sport that you're in, or the challenge of what you're doing, and what you're building, etc., I think that's where motivation is, not all the other, oh, that would be nice, or I wish I was like him, or my parents want me to do that. That's all external and outside of yourself. Has to come from within you,
Yes, exactly,
you know?
exactly.
And it's easy. That's easy, actually. I find it easy to work. That's my fun part,
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
exactly. Do you have any activities that we could do on a regular basis to, maintain, I'm doing, commas
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
maintain good mental health, because I think
Yeah.
what's also important to note there is that mental health isn't something that is always stagnant. It's often fluctuating, and it
Hmm.
some days you're better than others, and it's an up
Mm,
and down kind of thing. It's
absolutely.
a big problem when it's extremes, up and downs, but
Yeah.
you'll go through depressions and happiness, and it's an up
Yeah.
and down kind of thing. Is there a way that is there any sort of activities we can do to kind of stay on track with everything?
Yeah. I think I guess there's so many, but one thing that's important is understanding that there's a purpose to all your emotions. emotions. I think people are really quick to
Mm,
run from, I'm doing quotation mark two, the negative emotions. There's a purpose to being angry. That's you saying, this is not working for me, I've had enough. That's a really, really useful thing. There's a reason we feel guilty, because if we didn't, we'd just go around hurting each other and never give a shit about it.
exactly.
There's a reason.
Guilty is one of those things. Sorry to cut you off, but guilty is one of
You're
those
right.
things that's really, a big issue. Like people saying, "Oh, you're, fat shaming me," or "You're,
Hmm.
like, it's fine to feel these things because they sort of guide us a
Yeah.
bit.
Absolutely. All your emotions do. And even you were talking about depression and feeling down. That's your body and your system saying, I'm not happy with this. So instead of trying to look for a quick solution and how to get back up and be happy, sometimes it's good to sit in that space and sort of reflect on why you're there and what is it that you don't like and what needs to change, or, how did you get there? So it's never, I think a life is not one where there's nobody out there that's just happy. If they are, they're probably hospitalized, because it's just not a thing. You're
Yeah,
supposed to have all of these. They all serve a purpose. That's why they're still around. So I think
exactly.
having that awareness is probably the number one thing, and just listening to your own needs rather than overriding them, I guess.
That's
Not to
such a good.
say that, not to say that when you get to a competition, if you listen to yourself, you just would all run. There's, that fight or flight kicks in. You're probably like, oh no, this doesn't feel good. I'm out of here.
Yeah,
So
like
not in that sense.
no, no, exactly. You're so right. I think what we're getting to then is just the more lifestyle kind of thing, which,
Yeah.
like you've said at the start of the podcast, is the foundations for sporting achievements, anyways.
Yeah.
Sporting mental health too, because if you're generally not happy with your life, then that's going to feed into what's going to happen when you go to
Yeah.
compete. So I think what you said there was really important. The fact that you should, if you're feeling sad, I think we got this thing where we run away from that. Whereas
Hmm.
I think it's
It's
important that we don't.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but
Mm.
like you're saying, it's just not something we should run away from, but it's rather something we
Mm.
should reflect upon and think, why is it that we're sad? And
Yeah.
then when you figure out what that is, then that's your catalyst for change, because and that's it's your motivation for change, because you're like, oh, I don't actually like this, I should change.
Hmm.
And then when you start to get demotivated on that change, you start to think about what it was like, when you're
Hmm.
sad. Then you're like, no, I can't have this, and then you continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you
Mm.
find out so much about yourself that, goes into everything. If you're having, we touched on fear of failure before. Where does that come from? If you're sort of, I feel so terrible after a bad result or a bad competition day that I can't sleep for a week, where's this coming from? That's bigger than just being a shit loser, like
Mm.
there's a lot more there. And if you can sort of dig a little bit and sit with it and see why, is it a worthiness thing? Is it, anyway, you can go so deep with these, but
Oh, for sure. I think
yeah,
what I really liked about all that is the fact that these emotions aren't bad things.
no,
And that's also why seeing a psychologist isn't a bad thing.
no.
It's not a sign of bad, it's just a sign of self-improvement. But it's when you understand that sadness isn't a bad thing, it's just a symptom of something that's going on. And
Yeah,
that maybe it's just okay to feel that, and then you'll move on, or you just got to reflect on it and then figure out what's going on. Then you can make
yeah,
that change. Or the anxiety that something's happening, and that you just reflect on why. And then
yeah.
that's when the help of a psychologist comes in, because sometimes you're not painting the clearest picture of it yourself, because it's hard. You can't see the forest
Mm,
from the trees, as they say, because you're
yeah,
too close to the trees to see the forest.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
the psychologist can really see all that and then help you
yeah.
understand what's going on.
That distance comes with clarity, right? Because if you're so
Mm.
close to it, it's all muddled up. Um, and coaches, I mean, I feel like coaches are all accidental counselors, and those support people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a psychologist either. Um, but yeah, we definitely can help.
No, you're totally right. And because often the case is that the coach is their solution to your mental health issues is just rub some dirt in it. But
Yes, yes. I've
like
had
that's
a, I've had a, I've had a coach of I'm not going to say who it is, of a well-known team, and he said the way that we would start doing sports psychology is that I would have to go in there and convince them of it. And I said, I'm not wasting my time,
oh really?
because if you believed in it, then the work would already be done. But as the coach, if you need me to come in there for the first time to explain to a professional team what this is about, then I don't have the time for that,
No,
right?
no.
And it does what you say, the rub the dirt in it. It's absolutely, I
You're
think
so
the
right about
coaches
that,
need to
because if the
start.
coach is not in on that,
Mm-mm.
you're kind of got this thing where the coach is like, come on guys, let's just go give it a shot, eh?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
no.
whereas the coach is like, guys, this is it. Like, this is, he already
Yeah,
knows what's really good about this. And then that's a tough
you,
situation to be in.
yeah, I think usually good coaches already have an understanding that they're using some of the language. They're already doing some of this. So when I talk to those athletes a bit more, their buy-in is already there. Like they already know the value, and I know the value, and I'm different, I suppose, if we're talking to school kids, they haven't been exposed to it before, and that's where we start out. That's totally fine. They still haven't been exposed to it, but at a professional level, for me to go in and explain what I do and why, and it's just, I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to
No,
happen.
exactly. It's almost like it seems to me as if the coach was just trying to tick another box. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, go. We should do yoga, I suppose, stretching support,
yeah.
and then yeah, we
Don't know much
sports
about it,
psychology.
but
Yeah, I guess we're not doing that. We could probably do some more of that, and
yeah,
then that's when the coach ends up getting fired.
yes. That coach did end up getting fired.
Oh, well, there you go.
Oh, that's funny.
Is there
Yeah.
anything that I should have asked you, but I did not ask you?
No. I think you've covered it all. I think the biggest thing with psychology, the biggest point is that something doesn't need to be broken or wrong for people to come see us. There's just so much in terms of that self-development and those skills, like we said, focusing and confidence and dealing with things that everybody can benefit from. So I think you can put your ego, drop the ego, and sort of be humble enough to want to learn about yourself and know that you are part of what's going on. I think, yeah, psychologist is an awesome place to start.
I'd like to finish on that and say that I feel like we've probably scratched the surface of this thing, because I think we could probably come back and have an entire another podcast on different subjects and related
Yeah,
relationships,
absolutely.
because this thing is just so epic, but it can be
Yeah,
it can be such an important thing,
yeah.
when you see what happens when a kid just gets some confidence, like
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my favorite strength coaches says that the one thing, there's 100% transferency of, sorry, that's probably not even a word.
Yeah.
There's 100% transfer of confidence from the weight room
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
field. Whether you got
absolutely.
stronger or not, there's
Yeah.
100% transfer of confidence that goes onto the field
Absolutely.
just because you think you've done something for yourself, and
Yeah.
then people just coaches just see huge improvements from that. Like I've seen kids go from being the slowest kid on the team to being the fastest kid on the team, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't put it all down to the fact that they just got that much better in the gym, but I got a feeling that the gym maybe gave them some physical confidence, which then allowed them to just maybe express themselves anymore and
Yeah.
just try harder, and then
Yeah.
that just made all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. We were watching Michael Jordan, that documentary that's making the rounds on Netflix at the
Yeah,
moment.
I haven't seen that yet. I
Oh,
saw
you
it, but I didn't
should.
watch
It's
it.
amazing. But he's amazing. Like a lot of things that we're talking about, he always pops to my mind. Like even you were talking about amping yourself up before a game or not. Like he's the typical example of somebody that's, if you watch the doco, you'll see him joking around and being really loud. He's that guy that needs that, where there's people that don't.
No.
But another thing, that there was a game that they were showing where they were going really crap, and then it just took that one confidence feeling, and he said it just turned everything around. And even the people said the energy in the room, like in the stadium, just changed. And it just shows you how contagious and how powerful it is. There's I don't know, have you heard of the power poses? Have you heard of those?
I have. Could you tell everyone about it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's perfect. This
There's
is
a
awesome, by the way.
there's I think she's actually a social psychologist, but anyway, she in a nutshell found that animals in the wild, the ones that keep from an evolutionary point of view going, are not necessarily the biggest ones, but they're the ones that make themselves look the biggest. So she then wanted to look at whether this happens in people as well, and she looked at politicians and Oprah and, you know, all of these people doing amazing things, and what she noticed is the power poses where they make themselves look big. Even people who are blind and don't know what it looks like was still sort of, if they ran really fast, was still putting their hands up in the air. And when she studied it closer, she found that, I think it was like a minute of holding a power pose, that confident, shoulders back, head up kind of situation, was increasing testosterone and decreasing cortisol and stress levels. So it's that whole fake it till you make it thing that just shows you. And I don't know, it's hard. You were, at some point you were talking about when you go in the field and you look at the other guys. I always say to my athletes, even just for that purpose, just try them. Just make yourself look bigger, so you just look like you might be ready.
Yep.
You know,
And I
and
wouldn't
you've got
even
one
say
on.
it's faking it till you're making it. You're just starting the process, and then that process evolves. I think that's what it is. I don't think it's faking it at all.
Yeah, well, they usually don't feel it, right? They don't usually feel confident when they first do it. And I've actually tested this with, I've done lots of workshops and stuff where I get two people to throw the ball the same way, and I get one of them to take the power poses while they're doing it and look me in the eyes, and we do the exact same thing. And I always purposefully pick the smaller person to do it. And when I ask the audience who's more confident, they always choose the little guy, just because of these power poses. So it's
Yes.
pretty cool.
And the flip side of that is the people in the study that actually end up doing the opposite pose.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, yeah, the same thing
No.
happened, but in opposite. So people who were cowering and holding really
Right.
timid postures, they might have been cowering into a corner or something like that, or just, you know, when you see people who are depressed and they've got this
Yeah,
really
yes,
hunched
yes, yes.
kind of thing and their shoulders are shrugged, and their estrogen levels went up and their testosterone levels went down,
Wow.
of course, and that's kind of your that's kind of like you're rolling towards
That
being more
withdrawal.
you know, depressed
Yeah,
and being not as
withdrawn, yeah.
confident. But so there's a lot to, that's when you sort of get to this point of and I want to tell this quick story that I heard on a Joe Rogan show, which was quite
Yeah.
interesting because he was talking to a psychologist. It ties into this, and he was saying that they had people who went to Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and drug use was rampant over there, and I think they
Of
were all taking
course.
opioids or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And so they're all addicted to drugs over there while they're
Mm-hmm.
fighting, and just to cope with the situation they're in, which is a terrible situation to be in, to go out to have
Mm.
to go kill people, see your friends die, and
Mm.
living in just filth, and it's just horrible, right?
Mm.
And then what happened is it was some number like 90 to something like 90% or 99% of the soldiers that went over
Mm.
there who were addicted came back, and their addictions just dropped right away.
Mm. Yeah.
Like they just went back to normal life. It's because, is it the fact that, you know, it's something inside of us that is causing these issues, or is it our surrounding
Mm.
life that's causing these issues? So is it the
Mm.
fact that you know, maybe you're holding this carrying posture that brings up your estrogen levels, that that sort of bring you to a state of maybe a bit more prone to being depressed or something like this? Or
Mm.
is it the fact that, you know, you could be holding nicer posture, you could be, you know, in a better situation, and then because of that you end up
Mm.
with more of a likelihood of being you know, positive
Mm.
and confident?
Yeah. Could be a mixture, right? The drug use in the army, I grew up during the war, in a war in Bosnia as a kid, and a lot of the men or family had to go in the army and stuff, and the drug use wasn't optional, it was actually forced on them.
Oh wow.
So a lot of them, I mean, they still got issues now, obviously 20 odd years later, but I think it's also that being out of that situation and having the choice, maybe, and
Mm.
not, like you said, not having to deal with all those horrific things and not feeling like you need to rely on those drugs either. So it's a, but in saying that, I've also seen people come out, and the suicide rates we know are so high for people in the army and that kind of stuff afterwards. So it's, yeah, it's a mixture, but there is a concept called learned helplessness, where you just learn to act that way in certain situations.
Right.
So, it's complex.
Oh,
There's
like
so
this is the
many,
thing, right? And we
right?
could even get talking about the I want to pronounce this properly, the amygdala.
The amygdala, yeah, the fear
That
center, yeah,
thing is fascinating in and of itself,
yeah,
and we could just do a whole podcast on that. I think the fact
yes,
that it remembers something that you don't even remember.
absolutely. I found when we had our little girl, so obviously, because I had been through a war, when I went for my registration as a psychologist, it was a big thing. So we go through like 2 years of pretty much counseling nearly every week, because you've got to sort your own stuff out before you can help other people sort it out. And even prior to that, I'm pretty aware. So I'm not somebody that ran away from all the things that I've been through. And when you say you don't remember, our little girl, when we had her, I was teaching her to transition into a crib, and I had a mattress down next to her crib in her room, and she kept crying, and I was having panic attacks, and I was so confused about why. And I thought, oh, it must be because, I'm tired, I'm a new mum and all that kind of stuff. And then I had a moment where I was like, oh, no, this is the familiarity from the war, because what used to happen is that we used to hide in a basement, and we had mattresses down. It was a small room, and my little brother was actually born into the war. So when we're hiding at night, if he cries, that's a really big problem, because then people can find us. So you fast forward all these years
Oh
later,
wow!
all these things I've dealt with, it's a happy time in my life, and I'm having, it's exactly what you said. My body remembered, I didn't.
Yep.
And once I put the two and two together, I think that's the magic thing about this self-awareness stuff. It didn't take long until they went away, because I was like, oh, that's what it is. I just need to reassure myself I'm safe, and it's okay for her to cry. And
Mm,
that bit of self-talk, it just sort of sorted it out.
exactly.
Luckily, because she didn't sleep. She's only started sleeping, and she's 2.5.
It's done
uh,
you wonders, I bet.
yeah,
I had a
lucky.
similar thing where I grew up in a sort of bad neighborhood.
Mm,
It's no war, that's for sure. It's just my little teenage angst, I'm sure. But
yeah.
we just grew up in a bad neighborhood where there was always domestics and fights throughout the night,
Mhm.
and it would wake you up. And
Mhm.
then I moved out of that neighborhood, and I went into a more peaceful neighborhood that was really nice and quiet. And
Mhm.
then one night there was some sort of ruckus, and I woke up and I swore I was back in my bed in that old neighborhood.
Yeah.
I just was like,
Yeah.
where am I? And then I was like, and I realized where I was. I was like, oh, and I went back to sleep. And
Yeah.
yeah, it
And
is
how
quite.
handy is that? How clever is your brain, right? In both our situations to go, I'm just making sure, I'm just letting you know, I'm making you feel really uncomfortable and reminding you so you don't go through that again.
Yes, and that's
So
the other thing. I want
useful.
to go back to the positive side of that, because it's not that
Mm.
the amygdala is a negative thing. It's just that it serves its purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think knowing that and understanding how to calm it, and there's so many ways to if you're on that, how can I say? So, for example, for me, because we were in such a high stress situation for so many years, you find that a lot of migrants recreate a level of that hyperactivity.
Ah.
There's a lot of, because the comfort is stress. That's the comfort, and that's the familiarity. So a lot of them have lots of jobs and a lot of things going on. Um, but there's so many ways. I mean, even the naturopath that we work with and things like that, there's so many ways to rebuild that nervous system. A bit like immunity, right? If you were sick for a long time, your immunity is low, there's ways to rebuild that. So there's ways to calm the amygdala as well. But it's definitely useful, so useful.
Yeah. Does it serve the purpose of like that quick reaction of like, shit, something's about to happen, and it
Yeah,
thinks before we think?
absolutely. It's your instinct. It's so instinctive to, survive. So,
Mm.
and it doesn't have to be big things either. This is the thing. Like, you might be driving and you have one car accident, and you'll be reminded of that over and over and over. I
Yes,
was
every time
saying
you get
there's
in the
like a
car.
thinking brain and the observing brain.
Mm.
The amygdala is definitely part of that thinking one. That's just go, 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 go. So the way that you get back in the car is that the other part switches in and goes, it's all right. We've been through this
Exactly. And you can
before.
imagine that people who have had,
Mm,
ACLs, like a traumatic injury on the field, and then,
yeah,
you know, that kind of, whether they know it or not, could be making them more nervous than what they need to be in the back of their mind. And
absolutely.
I guess the whole part of that, the average athlete would just slowly getting back into it, finding confidence through the fact that, okay, just because I got in this tackle doesn't mean I'm going to get injured or whatever. Then
Yeah.
you start to build that, and then the amygdala will actually start to will start to calm down a
Yeah.
little bit, and then it'll kind of leave you
Exactly.
alone.
It gets
Yeah.
replaced because it always, remembers the last time. So the last
Yes.
time I was on a mattress in a small room with a kid crying had been all that time before. So once you start to replace it in a safe way, I think that's the other key thing, that you go back out on the field, but you also with your self-talk reassure yourself. It's
Yes.
fine. I've done this before. I've got this, that kind of stuff. I'm safe. That's what chills things back down.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave it there. Where
Cool.
can everyone come and learn more about you?
MazMiller.com is
Yes.
me, and Miss Maz Miller. Even though I'm not a miss, I should have called that Mrs. Miss Maz Miller on all my social media as well.
That might be taken. You have to go check it out.
Yep.
I've got to commend you on your social media too. I think you do a really good job on Instagram of putting up
Oh,
nice
thank
content
you.
as well.
Thank
Yeah, I've
you.
been
Thank you
enjoying
so
it. It's been
much.
quite good.
Cool. Well, we're kicking off the 40-day challenge today.
Oh yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, no more sugar for me for 40 days. So
Oh
this is my
yes.
little, I guess my practical version of healthy habit stacking. I like to think of it as. So I think I was saying to you earlier, this year, when I started the year, I wanted to do all the health things. I was like, I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to drink my water. I'm going to be not super positive, but not let the other stuff happen, because we started the year with the fires. There was just a lot of that going on. The thought of doing it all at once was quite overwhelming. So every year I do this 40-day challenge for myself. So for 40 days, I give up something or start something new. And this year I decided to share it, and it's been amazing. All these people are jumping on. So my first one, I ran for 40 days for half an hour, and I was saying, hate running. The next one, I drank 2 liters of water. And now this one, I am not having sugar for 40 days. And it's amazing because I've kept all the habits that I started. So
Oh wow.
that's the idea behind it.
The sugar one, from personal experience, I found that's actually quite a good one.
The which one, sorry?
Quitting sugar.
Yeah. I've done it before. I did it with, Sarah Wilson. Do you know
Mm,
Sarah Wilson? She
no,
had
I
like
don't
a
know.
I quit sugar program. I did
I've
it
heard
with
of
her.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard of that.
I did it with her years ago. And when I did it, I ended up being one of the experts in their online group when they
Oh,
had the
nice.
online program. So that was heaps of fun.
Mm,
But it definitely, and this is where, you were saying the motivation behind people that are doing the challenge with me, the first thing I get everybody to do is come up with their why. And then the 40 days gets easier because it gets hard as you go. Everyone's
yes.
excited in week 1.
Yeah,
And
no,
then,
exactly. I don't know. I found like things like my skin got clearer when I stopped having so
yes,
much sugar.
yes,
Don't know what that's about, but it did. Um, I found that
yeah.
otherwise I'd still keep up my fats and proteins
Mm,
and carbohydrates otherwise, and I was finding I was getting leaner a lot
yeah,
easier. Then I started cutting out my carbs for dinner, and I got really lean.
yeah,
But yeah, it's quite an interesting thing when you start to cut out the sugar, and then especially if you've got issues with like mood swings and whatnot. If you were
yes.
to just sort of keep your sugar down, it just helps stabilize things a little bit.
Hmm. And for me, all these behavioral things, like I keep talking about this self-awareness and self-development stuff. Again, one of my whys behind that is I'm not, to be honest, right now, I wouldn't be aware when I'm reaching for it.
Mm,
So they're not that we've got a professional athlete living here. We're not an unhealthy household by any means, but I know there's things around, and I'm just curious to see, if nothing else, how often and why that's
oh
become
yeah.
my
No,
go-to,
exactly. Not that Nathan's gonna have, because Nathan's an athlete.
Yeah,
You need sugar at
he
the
needs it.
appropriate times, and then so that stuff's around the house.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. But yeah, I was just thinking, we've got like a licorice jar. And I'm like, I would not have an awareness of when and why I reach for that. So it's going to be really cool to learn that about myself, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. That is quite interesting. So, all right. Well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
All right. I'll end the show there. Thank you very much for
Cool.
being with us.
No worries.